Han Li and Nan Longho encountered a mysterious giant serpent in the state of Zemo. It even swallowed a magic treasure into its belly. This made Han Li's expression turn grave. Seeing his flying sword swallowed, Nan Longho, who was standing by, was first startled, then delighted. That golden flying sword of his had taken him over 100 years of time to cultivate into his life-bound magic treasure. Originally, this giant python's scales were incredibly tough. It was impossible to harm it in the slightest from the outside. But now that it had been swallowed into its belly, wasn't that golden light seeking its own doom? Thinking of this, Nan Longho said nothing. He hurriedly used his divine sense to command that golden flying sword, preparing to let it unleash its power inside the giant python's belly, and burst out directly from the demon beast's body, ending the giant python's life. But the next moment, Nan Longho's expression froze. Although he could still feel a connection to his life-bound treasure, it was currently inside the giant python's belly, trapped by something and unable to move at all. This time, he couldn't help but become nervous. After all, if his life-bound magic treasure were to be damaged, he, who was connected to it by soul and mind, would surely suffer a severe backlash. Fellow Taoists, my flying sword is trapped. This giant serpent is truly no ordinary demon beast. You should be a bit more careful. As soon as he finished his cautionary words, Nuon Ho took a deep breath, his expression grim. He raised a hand. A jade green ring slipped off his finger and flew out. It floated in front of him. The surface of the ring flickered between light and dark. Faintly, runes of various colors flashed continuously. It seemed this was no ordinary treasure. On the other side, Lu Wang, seeing the power of Han Nai and his companion's treasures, was startled. He also hurriedly recalled his magical artifact. Then, with a flick of his hand, several talismans flew out lightly. Immediately, a white light erupted. Dozens of strange, dazzlingly white fireballs appeared out of thin air in front of the old man. Han Nai was still looking at these white fireballs in surprise. At a glance, he faintly felt that he seemed to have heard of this type of fireball somewhere before. But now was not the time to think about this matter. Not at this moment. He turned back and slapped the storage pouch at his waist. For beams of white light shot out from the pouch and landed on the ground. 3 white wolves, 2 red bulls, and a green python. These were the very ones from the trade fair that he had gotten in exchange from perfected Master Tenjin. Several ancient puppet beasts. After obtaining these puppets, Han Li had not yet truly used them. Now, facing the giant python bone beast, it was the perfect opportunity to test their power. Nan Longho and the old man saw Han Li's puppet beasts and showed a slight look of surprise, but their expressions quickly returned to normal. All 3 were highly experienced in combat. After exchanging a solemn glance, they were about to use their respective divine abilities and attack together. But the giant python stared at the 3 of them, its eyes glinting fiercely. It actually tilted its head back first and forcefully exhaled a breath. Instantly, a nauseatingly foul stench arose, rushing towards Han Li and the other 2. Han Li and the others were startled. They hurriedly activated their protective auras, as spiritual light flashed wildly around them, and held their breath. But in the next moment, they discovered that although the foul stench was unpleasant, it was not a harmful gas. The 3 of them hesitated for a moment, stunned and confused. But in that brief moment of delay, the giant python's massive, bloody maw opened wide, its serpentine belly flattened, and it suddenly inhaled. In an instant, the gravel and dirt in front of the giant python, they all bounced up from the ground. All at once, they surged into the giant python's mouth. The 3 of them were unable to resist. It felt as if someone had pushed them forcefully from behind. Their steps faltered. In an instant, the 3 of them were unable to move a single inch. They were lifted into the air out of nowhere. They were to be shot directly into the giant python's mouth. Han Li's limbs were like puppets. There was no resistance at all. They were directly sent past. In an instant, they were right at the edge of the python's mouth. Han Li showed a hint of fear, but inside, she was not the least bit anxious. A flash of light appeared outside her body. Her figure immediately became incredibly heavy. She began to fall downwards. At the same time, her mind moved. The 6 puppet beasts that had just reached the giant python's mouth suddenly launched an attack. The 4 horns of the 2 red bulls flashed with red light. Suddenly, they burst forth from the chicken coop. They transformed into 4 beams of light. The beams shot towards the giant python's wide-open mouth. The giant python was fully focused on absorbing Han Li and the others. As a result, the beams easily landed on the exposed tongue of the female python. The chicken coop opened wide to the giant python. That giant python was fully focused on absorbing Zhang Hanli and the others. As a result, the wings effortlessly accumulated on the exposed tongue of the female python. After a flash of red light, the sound of thumping echoed. The giant python let out a low groan of pain. Its massive heart shrank back in an instant. Although the extent of the injury was unclear, its mouth, which had been roaring wildly, paused for a moment. In this brief moment of relaxation, the three-headed white wolf regained control of its body. A bright white light radiated from its body, instantly regaining control over its movements, for wolf claws extended with several inches of sharp fur. The wolf's mouth revealed sharp fangs resembling blades. Its figure flickered and transformed into 3 white red shadows, directly lunging at the python's head. A sizzling sound, like the sound of metal scraping, came from the python's head, although it was unclear why. The previous greenish light did not appear this time, but whether it was the long fangs or the busy movements, they only left a faint white mark that could not harm the giant python in the slightest. However, 2 of the white wolves immediately slowed down, diverting to the sides, directly pouncing towards the python's 2 exposed eyes. Its eyeballs were exposed, without the protection of its scales. The purple shadow flashed, with 2 dull thuds sounding out. A dull thud echoed twice. The 2 white wolves had just flown halfway, when the giant python flicked out its forked tongue with lightning speed, swinging it left and right. The one on the left was immediately struck hard and sent flying. The house-sized snake head tilted slightly. It caught one of the white wolf puppets that had been knocked back, and swallowed it whole in its massive mouth. As it was about to do the same to the other puppet, that green python puppet suddenly expanded its body 24 feet wide, and pounced fiercely upon it. Meanwhile, the 2 red bulls once again shot out their horns. The giant pythonic beast, attacked by these puppets, was completely enraged. It let out a low roar from its mouth. After its snake-like head shook violently, a plume of black gas spewed from its nostrils, instantly enveloping its entire head. The 2 remaining white wolves seized the opportunity to fly back and retreat, but 2 black shadows flashed out from within the black gas, and simultaneously bit down on both white wolves. They were actually 2 identical, but smaller, snake heads. All of this takes a while to describe, but it all happened in a flash. Just then, the black gas quickly dissipated, revealing the giant python's true form. Meanwhile, Han Li and the others on the opposite side had just regained their freedom. Immediately, cries of alarm were heard. "It's the three-headed witch serpent. How can this be?" The voices of the 3 were filled with disbelief. In front of them was a monstrous serpent with 3 heads. It was staring at them furiously. The middle snake head raised itself, constantly flicking its tongue. Meanwhile, the heads on its left and right bit down hard at the same time, about to crush the puppet beasts in their mouths. But at that very moment, a cold voice came from the opposite side, with 2 deafening booms. The 2 puppet beasts in the snake heads' mouths exploded. They turned one after another into 2 masses of blinding white light. It was dazzlingly bright. When Han Li saw his white wolf puppets were restrained, he formed a hand seal without hesitation, using his divine sense to directly detonate the 2 puppets. Although the body of the 3-headed giant serpent was incredibly tough, its mouths did not possess such an insane level of defense, and these 2 white wolf puppets were made from many unknown and precious materials, and meticulously refined. The power of their self-destruction was also extraordinary. Therefore, after the explosions, the 2 snake heads simultaneously let out blood-curdling screams, showing an expression of unbearable pain. The middle snake head, however, was completely unaffected, but it became even more enraged. He swung his body, sweeping the tail of the giant snake in front of him. A dark shadow flashed. It sent the recently pounced green python puppet flying away. It crashed down over Tenjong away, unable to get up. At the same time, he reached forward blindly. He bit down hard. He actually crushed a red bull puppet. This left Han Li with no chance to self-destruct the puppet. Meanwhile, the male monkey and the old man with the surname Liu, under the distraction of Han Li's several puppet beasts, finally launched their attack in a panic. First, the old man sent dozens of pure white fireballs flying through the sky with a gesture. The male monkey then waved his hand, casting a spell on the green ring. The ring shook violently, suddenly splitting into 2, then 4, and then 8. In one breath, it conjured out over 100 identical phantoms, with the real ring mixed among them, transforming into a sea of green light. Flying towards the chicken coop, Han Li calmly clapped his hands, sending a dark object soaring into the air. This object surged with wind, transforming into a peak over Tenjong high in the black light. Moreover, it continued to swell uncontrollably under the spell's erosion. It was indeed that ancient castle of Chanchongfang. In the black light, it suddenly transformed into a towering peak over Tenjong high. Moreover, it continued to swell uncontrollably under the erosion of the spell. It was indeed the ancient castle of Qianchong Peak. Facing a giant python of this enormous size, a monster with thick skin and tough flesh, using this magic treasure should be the most appropriate method. However, this giant python's movements were not slow at all. He must first find a way to trap it. As Han Li was pondering, The heads on the left and right sides of the three-headed giant python seemed to have recovered from the earlier self-detonation. The two large mouths opened, and two thick, gray beams of light shot out. The white fireball first collided with the beams of light. A loud explosion erupted. The fireball instantly turned into a wave of white fire, and intertwined with the gray light, reaching a stalemate where neither could overcome the other. Meanwhile, those emerald green rings flew straight past the struggle between the gray light and the wave of fire, and shot directly towards the three-headed beast. Han Li's black hurricane followed unhurriedly behind the green shadows. Drifting forward slowly, the giant python, seeing the menacing aura of the green lights, seemed to sense some kind of threat. The main head let out a low roar, with a flash of spiritual light. An azure glow enveloped its entire massive body. Then, its cavernous mouth opened wide, and it suddenly lunged forward. The emerald ring transformed into a phantom of light. Under the giant python's ferocious pounds, it dissipated into thin air upon the slightest contact. Only a single ring hiding behind remained. After a slight flicker, it instantly vanished from its spot, appearing above the giant python's head. Then, it transformed. The brightly shining ring turned into a streak of green light, and shot downwards with lightning speed. At the python's vital spot, there suddenly appeared a green jade ring magnified countless times. It suddenly tightened, and began to constrict with all its might, sinking deep into the giant python's flesh. Even for a serpent as enormous as the giant python, having its vital spot restrained, it could not bear the excruciating pain. It immediately began to thrash on the ground in agony. Its head slammed violently against the ground. At the same time, the green light on its vital spot flickered incessantly, as if it was desperately trying to break free from the jade ring's restraint. The two smaller heads also showed looks of pain from the effect. Because of this, the gray pillar of light that was in a stalemate with the white fiery wave came to an abrupt halt. Seeing this, Lu Wang's eyes lit up. Seizing this opportunity, under the command of his incantation, the white flame surged forward as a fiery wave tens of feet high. A sea of fire instantly engulfed the giant python. However, the cyan radiance on the giant python's body was formidable, even though a white fire had completely surrounded it. For a moment, only the cyan light could be seen flashing incessantly. This python was rolling on the ground because the green ring was tightening around its vital spot, but its body showed no signs of damage whatsoever. Suddenly, a black light flashed above the giant python. A black mountain peak, dozens of yards high, appeared out of thin air. The mountain peak spun smoothly in the air. A vast black mist spewed out from the bottom of the peak, instantly enveloping the giant python below. The giant python's form immediately became sluggish and slow within the black light. Every single movement felt as if it carried the weight of 1,000 pounds, and the black mountain peak, seizing this opportunity, plummeted straight down. The three-handed crowned python sensed that things were not looking good. Its three blind hands struggled to rise one after another, and frantically shot several orbs of light into the air, trying to stop the giant peak from falling. But these orbs of light were also swallowed by the black mist. Before they could even touch the mountain peak, they began to disintegrate and disperse on their own in midair. Seeing this, the giant python was still unwilling to surrender without a fight. It used all its strength to slam the ground fiercely with its serrated tail. Its body shot out forcefully from within the mist, but at this moment, the surrounding white flames, it transformed into over 10 thick chains of fire, which then wrapped around the giant python's body, sending it flying for dozens of feet, before it crashed heavily to the ground again. The mountain peak finally came smashing down, dark and oppressive. A black light flared brightly where the mountain peak landed, making it impossible to look at directly for a moment. The three-headed beast only had time to let out a miserable shriek, before being drowned out by a deafening rumble. Nan Dong, whose face lit up with joy, while the old man Lu Zun let out a long sigh of relief. Only Han Li glanced over, his brow furrowing slightly without him realizing it. The black light gradually faded, revealing the scene in the distance. Underneath the black peak, the three-headed giant python had surprisingly not been killed instantly, but one of its heads was still exposed outside the giant peak, hissing and roaring desperately, and was swinging its head back and forth, its eyes filled with a crazed look. The life force of this python was truly astonishing. Lu Wang snorted. With a wave of his hand, a white chain of light shot out. It circled above the python's head and wrapped lightly around it. Without the azure and crimson light protecting it, the python's head was effortlessly severed and fell. Snake blood sprayed out from the remaining torso. The bloody corpse didn't move in the slightest. It's finally dealt with, but it was a bit surprising. This three-headed filth-tongued doesn't seem as powerful as the legends say. Elder Lu Zun's expression relaxed. He muttered, "This might not be a real filth-tongue. Don't forget, the real three-headed dark snake, besides having 3 snake heads, also has a pair of fleshy wings." It said the 3 snake heads can simultaneously cast powerful techniques of different elements. This female python doesn't resemble that at all. Otherwise, how could we have succeeded so easily? Nan Meng, who also shook his head. A look flashed in his eyes. Perhaps this female python is a mutation of another snake beast species. It's not that just because it can transform 3 heads. It's definitely the 3-headed dark snake. We don't need to figure out the dead snake's origin either. Let's just hurry into the passage, Han Li said faintly. Then he pointed a finger at the giant peak. The mountain peak rapidly shrank. It transformed into a streak of black light and flew into his sleeve. It disappeared without a trace. In its place, the python's remains, which had been turned into a meat paste, were revealed. Nan Meng, who also gestured with his hand, a streak of golden light and a ball of green light, suddenly floated up from the remains. After a hum, they flew back one after the other. It was the golden flying sword and the emerald ring. The flying sword went directly into his body, while the ring returned to its original form, and was placed back on his finger. The old man glanced around. After a moment of thought and a few flashes, he appeared beside the python's corpse. He casually made a grabbing motion into the saw python's skull. A thumb-sized, cyan inner core appeared in his hand. The old man showed a hint of satisfaction. After looking at the other 2 skulls, he took an inner core from each of them as well. At this moment, Han Li, who was putting away the remaining puppet beasts, and Marquis Nan Long also flew over. Without a word, the old man took the inner cores in his hand and tossed one to each of them. Han Li caught the item with one hand. He gave it a brief glance and impassively put it away. Marquis Nan Long, of course, accepted it without any hesitation. He casually cast a fireball, turning the giant python's corpse to ash. The old man then spoke up, saying, "This time, if any one of us had encountered this beast alone, I'm afraid our chances of survival would have been slim. But with the 3 of us working together, exterminating bone beasts of this level shouldn't be too difficult. If that fire-toad beast is also this easy to handle, this journey would be much easier. I hope so, but that fire-toad beast is most likely more troublesome. After all, back in the day, Adept King Kun, no matter how greatly his vitality was damaged, a demonic beast that could make him flee in disarray definitely won't be simple." The burly man sighed. He said with a wry smile. Hearing this, old man Lu pondered for a moment, and then nodded silently. At this moment, Han Li transformed into a streak of clear light. He retrieved all the formation flags that had been set up around them. Then he flew back swiftly and said, "Let's go." Exactly how formidable that fire-toad beast is, we will soon find out, Han Li said in a deep voice. He then took the lead and strode forward. The burly man and the old man exchanged a glance, and immediately followed closely behind. After all, the upcoming Arctic primordial light could only be passed by relying on Han Li's 2 element rings. Looking ahead, the swirling mist from before was completely gone. Everything ahead was crystal clear. It was still a stone path over 100 yards wide. To the left, right, and above was filled with a blood-red, silent light. It was impossible to see anything clearly. Han Li and the other 2 were at a low altitude of 50 to 60 feet. They were slowly flying forward. After flying for over 6 miles, the scenery before them suddenly changed. A tall, pale yellow stone wall appeared. A dark cave entrance was visible in the stone wall. It looked to be about 70 to 80 feet wide. This is the place. Passing through this cave should lead to the inner valley. But inside the cave, there is northern polar divine light stretching for more than 3 miles. Brother Han, in a moment, we will be relying entirely on your dual rings. Marquis Nan Long let out a long breath. He turned his face to Han Li and said, "Since we know there's northern polar divine light in the cave, can't we pass through the stone wall somewhere else? Must we really go through this cave?" Lu Wang stroked his chin and said with a glint in his eyes, "That method is completely unfeasible. If you try attacking this stone wall with a magic treasure, you'll understand the reason why." Marquis Nan Long shook his head and said calmly, "Oh, let me try." Evidently, the old man wasn't ready to give up. With a flick of his elegant robe, that white chain of light shot out once again. It slashed fiercely against the stone wall. Han Li saw it clearly this time. That chain of light was actually a uniquely styled short blade. It seemed to be a rare type of flying dagger magical artifact. Under Han Li's gaze, the flying dagger erupted with a blinding white light upon striking the stone wall. Sensing something, Lu Wang's expression changed slightly. He reached out and beckoned. Immediately recalling the flying dagger, Han Li looked closely at the spot where the flying dagger had struck. A faint blade mark, about an inch deep, had appeared. And within the blade mark, spakes of fluorescent light were faintly emanating. At this, a look of surprise flashed across the old man's face. He hastily strode forward. Walking up to the blade mark, he began to observe it carefully. Steel silver sand. There's actually raw steel silver sand ore in this stone wall. The old man only observed it for a moment, before his voice began to tremble slightly. Upon hearing the words steel silver sand, Han Li's expression changed drastically. He also walked forward. He extended a finger and gently caressed the blade mark, and began to examine it carefully. Han Li had, of course, heard of a material like steel silver sand, because it could be added during artifact refining. It was one of the few materials that could make magical artifacts much sturdier. In terms of its effect, it's a rare material, second only to those used in alchemy. This material itself is also incredibly hard. It's difficult to damage even with magic treasures. Whether in the Luoyang Crossing Sea or the Tian Nan cultivation world, it is considered a forbidden and extinct substance. No wonder when Lu Wang's flying dagger struck it, it had almost no effect whatsoever. Han Li's expression grew solemn. After looking at the dagger marks for a while, he suddenly raised a hand without a word. More than 10 small swords shimmering with clear light shot out from his sleeve. They transformed into over a dozen streaks of azure light, shooting at various spots on the stone wall. Nan Longho and the other man were startled at first, but they quickly understood Han Li's intention. A chaotic series of clanging sounds was heard. Over a dozen holes, each several inches deep, appeared on the stone wall. Spakes of fluorescent light emanated from each of the holes. It is indeed steel silver sand. Moreover, the entire stone wall is mixed with steel silver sand, but the density is not uniform. It seems this wasn't man-made. Instead, the wall itself contains a vein of steel silver sand. Or vein? A hint of joy appeared on Han Li's face, but he spoke in an unhurried tone, seeing that Han Li's flying swords could actually pierce the stone wall and create holes several times deeper than his flying dagger. The expressions of Nan Longho and the old man changed slightly, but when the old man Lu heard this, an intense look of greed appeared in his eyes. He stared fixedly at the stone wall, not saying another word. On Marquis Nan Long's face, a similar fiery look also flashed by, but after a moment of consideration, his expression gradually returned to normal. Let's go investigate that treasure first, Marquis Nan Long said calmly. We're leaving now. This steel silver sand is a rare treasure. We should break some off first before we go. The old man hesitated for a moment. He said with a look of reluctance, Brother Lu, how can you be so muddle-headed right now? This steel silver sand is incredibly hard. Didn't you just witness it for yourself? Even if there might be an entire vein of steel silver sand or here, a piece of raw ore the size of a fist can only be refined into a tiny speck the size of a grain of rice, of pure steel silver sand. How much time would you have to spend, and how much magical power would you consume, just to cut off enough raw ore? Besides, while this item is certainly precious, don't forget, what we lack right now are not these material possessions, but spiritual medicines that can extend our lifespan and rapidly advance our cultivation realm. Otherwise, when the end comes, we will be nothing more than a pile of white bones. Nan Longhu frowned. He glanced at the old man, and said with deep meaning. When Lu Wang heard Nan Longhu say this, he was stunned for a moment. Then, with a look of realization, he nodded repeatedly. Brother Nan Long is right. This old man was momentarily blinded by the treasure. I almost forgot the main purpose of this trip. Thank you, Brother Nan Long, for reminding me. The old man was no ordinary cultivator. After being reminded by Nan Longhu, he immediately came to his senses. With a trace of gratitude, he faced Nan Longhu and cupped his hands in a fist salute. Then he stopped looking at the stone wall. Fearing he would be tempted again, he quickly walked deeper into the cave. Only then did the expression on Nan Longho's face soften. He beckoned to Han Li, and they also went inside. Han Li, facing the entire vein of steel silver sand, was also extremely reluctant to leave it behind. His steps couldn't help but slow down a bit. However, even if his flying sword was far sharper than an ordinary one, and he had spiritual liquid to quickly restore his magic power, cutting enough of the raw steel silver sand ore would still not be an easy task. On the contrary, it was highly likely it would arouse the jealousy of Nan Longhu and the other man. It seemed really difficult to know where to start. Han Li could only let out a soft sigh. With a heart full of regret, he was about to follow the two of them into the cave. But just at that moment, suddenly, in Han Li's mind, he recalled the voice transmission of the great Divine Lord. Heh, to think there's so much astral silver sand. Back in my day, I searched painstakingly for a long time, and couldn't find much of it at all. It's truly worthy of being called the Fallen Devil Valley. This stuff is perfect for use on the new puppets I've developed. If you infuse puppet bodies with this astral silver sand, ordinary treasures won't be able to harm them in the slightest. Take all of this astral silver sand. The great Divine Lord's voice was filled with excitement. Take it all, old monster. Are you dreaming? This is an astral silver sand load, not just a temporary deposit. How am I supposed to take it all? Am I going to hack it out piece by piece with my flying sword? Upon hearing this, Han Li retorted irritably, HMPH, since I, the Divine Lord, have said so. Of course I have a way. Don't you have a lot of gold-devouring beetles? Kid, I'll teach you a magic formula. It can be used to control the gold-devouring beetles to burrow into the rock wall and consume the astral silver sand, and then spit it back out to crystallize into steel silver sand. This method I obtained from a powerful cultivator I killed back in the day. It's not just the gold bugs. Other types of spirit bugs can do this as well. It's just not as convenient as your gold-devouring beetles. The great Divine Lord said, as if long prepared. There's actually such an incantation. Good. Teach it to me. I'll have these spirit bugs start collecting the steel silver sand immediately. Han Li was both surprised and delighted to hear this. He immediately replied, it was unclear if it was for the steel silver sand, or for the incantation itself. Let me make this clear to you first. No matter how much steel silver sand is obtained, it must first be reserved for me to refine the final puppet. It absolutely cannot be wasted on anything else, and it certainly cannot be incorporated into your magic treasures. If there is any left over after refining the puppet, you can do whatever you want with the rest. I won't interfere in the slightest. Before passing the incantation to Han Li, the great Divine Lord calmly stated his conditions. Senior, it seems you are not yet aware. My magic treasures have no need to be infused with steel silver sand, as they have long been tempered with refined gold. That material is far more effective than steel silver sand. Hearing this, Han Li couldn't help but chuckle. Refined gold, you still have such a heaven-defying material. Is there any of it left? Even if there's just a tiny bit, I can put it to great use. The great Divine Lord Yan seemed to freeze in shock for a moment, but he immediately shouted with excitement. His voice was filled with absolute ecstasy. You know that the magic treasure I use is a complete set of flying swords. Although the amount of refined gold I obtained back then was not small, it was just barely enough to forge them. So, how could there be any left over? Han Li replied calmly, none left. What a colossal waste of a precious material? The great Divine Lord Yan suddenly became disappointed. He muttered to himself in deep regret. Hearing this, Han Li couldn't help but secretly roll his eyes. Using refined gold on my own life-bound magic treasure, how could that be considered a colossal waste? However, he currently needed something from the other man, so he could only feign ignorance and listen to him, as he uttered a few words of complaint. By this time, Han Li had already followed the two people in front into the cave for some distance, and he deliberately, yet casually, created a certain distance to prevent the man from noticing anything unusual about him. This cave was somewhat dark, but the three of them were undoubtedly individuals of profound cultivation. By simply infusing a little spiritual power into their eyes, they could see their general surroundings clearly, without any problem at all. The size of the cave remained the same as at the entrance. The two colored stone walls were still that same, pale yellow color. Along the way, he casually used a flying sword again to slash at the stone wall. As a result, what was revealed was still a sparkling, fluorescent color. Han Li became rather covetous, but in his heart, the thought of occupying these ore veins grew even stronger. As Han Li walked, he listened to the great Divine Sovereign transmit an insect-repelling incantation to his divine sense. Although the incantation was composed entirely of ancient text, and was somewhat obscure and difficult to understand, but with just a few words of guidance from the great Divine Sovereign, Han Li, who already had some experience with insect-repelling arts, immediately had an epiphany, and smoothly grasped its complete meaning. Once the incantation had been fully transmitted, the great Divine Sovereign's voice fell silent once again. Han Li then lowered his head and contemplated the incantation one more time. After confirming there were no mistakes, he made a seemingly casual sweep of his hand toward his waist. A spirit beast pouch suddenly vanished from sight. In the end, Han Li's walking posture did not change in the slightest, but from within his sleeve, golden gold-devouring beetles flew out silently one by one, and quietly flew back the way they came. The two people walking ahead did not notice Han Li's little trick at all. After walking for about the time it takes to drink a cup of tea, the gold-devouring beetles in the bag were all released. His hands, hidden within his sleeves, formed an incantation seal, and formed a dharma seal. At the same time, the sound of a low incantation was heard, and it was transmitted through the divine stone back to the cave entrance, onto the large swarm of gold-devouring beetles floating before the stone wall. The golden cloud of insects suddenly burst with a brilliant golden light. Then, after all the flying insects blurred for a moment, they charged towards the stone wall like a swarm of bees. As a result, they met no resistance at all, and directly phased into the stone wall, vanishing without a trace. Yet the surface of the stone wall appeared completely undamaged. Han Li sensed this situation using the divine stone, Only then did he withdraw his spiritual sense with peace of mind, and slightly quickened his pace. After walking for a while longer, just as he rounded a bend, the two people ahead of him stopped. Han Li's heart tensed up. He hurriedly looked ahead. He saw that the path ahead suddenly opened up. The passage suddenly became extremely wide. Within this wide passage, it was covered from top to bottom with strange, stalactite-like stones, and they emitted faint strands of silvery white light, illuminating the entire passage. These silver threads were exceptionally strange. Although it was clearly something intangible, yet every strand of light was distinctly clear, as if it were tangible. This is the northern polarity primordial light. Although you fellow Taoists should already know some of this, I must still give another reminder. Within the northern polarity primordial light, aside from the two-winged ring, you absolutely must not recklessly use any spiritual power or magic treasures. Once spiritual power leaks from your body and is sensed by the northern polarity primordial light, the three of us will surely be doomed. Nan Longho gazed at the silver strands ahead. After taking a deep breath, he spoke with great solemnity. Han Li remained silent. He did not answer his words, but instead, he flicked his sleeve. A jet black ring flew out. After circling once, it landed in his palm. Light flashed incessantly on the ring. Seeing Han Li take out the two-winged ring, Nan Longho and Lu Wang's figures immediately blurred, and they retreated behind Han Li with grave expressions. To show that Han Li would now take the lead, Han Li held the ring in his cupped hands. He opened his mouth, and a cloud of hazy green essence sprayed out from his mouth. Shining upon the ring, it flashed with a dark light. All the auras were completely absorbed by the ring. Then with a whoosh, it flew on its own to a spot above Han Li's head, and began to float there motionlessly. Han Li raised a hand with an expressionless face, and shot a spell seal onto it. The Liangyi ring trembled lightly, then it began to contract and expand. In the blink of an eye, the ring transformed into a ring 50 to 60 feet in diameter. Han Li extended a single, fair finger, and pointing at the ring, he uttered a soft command. It let out a strange, low hum. The giant ring shot out. Nan Long Ho and his companions' gazes immediately grew solemn. They only saw the giant ring plunge into the countless thousands of light filaments. An incredible scene appeared. The straight filaments of light, like a disturbed water surface, became chaotic the instant the giant ring entered. Amidst the incessant flickering of silver light, as soon as any of the silver threads touched the ring's outer surface, they would immediately and miraculously swerve, actually avoiding the ring, and go around it, as if they were sentient. Seeing this scene, Han Li breathed a sigh of relief in his heart. Nan Longho and his companion also revealed smiles. However, Han Li was still a bit curious about the power of this northern polar aura. After thinking for a moment, he slapped his storage bag with one hand. A blue, fist-sized, round pearl appeared in his hand. This was a high-grade protective spiritual tool he had obtained many years ago. Han Li held this pearl and slightly injected some spiritual power into it. Instantly, a shimmering blue light screen appeared on the pearl's surface. Han Li flicked it with a backhand motion. The round pearl turned into a ball of blue light and shot out. This time, as soon as the blue light pearl entered the northern polar aurora, the numerous silver threads acted as if they had seen delicious prey. After a tremor, they immediately swarmed forward and completely surrounded it. Countless threads as fine as hair pierced through the blue round pearl, treating its light shield as if it were nothing. A moment later, after being pierced by the numerous silver threads, the round pearl flashed wildly a few times. Then it exploded from within. It turned into a cloud of brilliant fluorescence and disappeared amidst the many light filaments. Han Li's pupils contracted slightly. The expressions of Marquis Nan Long and the old man also turned grim. Han Li's expression instantly returned to normal. He made a beckoning gesture with his hand, and it shot back, arriving above his head. It descended silently, enveloping all three of them within it. Then, a dim, murky glow appeared on the outside of the ring, shielding Han Li and the others inside. "Let's go." Han Li didn't say much. After speaking briefly, he started to walk. The two principal ring moved along with them. Marquis Nan Long and the old man surnamed Lu were inside the shield. They didn't dare to be the slightest bit careless, and obediently followed closely. Although they had seen the ring's effect on the Arctic primordial light, its miraculous defensive effect, they still didn't dare to activate any of their own defenses, nor did they dare to send out any magical artifacts. As they entered the Arctic primordial light, Han Li appeared calm on the surface, but in his heart, he was still a little worried. But the next moment, inside the Arctic primordial light, he saw that the filaments of light indeed went around the black glow. Not daring to come near them, his anxious heart finally settled down. A moment later, as he moved, he glanced to the side. He saw Marquis Nan Long walking beside him. Both of them also had relieved expressions. Han Li smiled faintly. He urged the two principal ring to move slowly forward. In another part of the fallen Demon Valley, a world of ice and snow near the inner valley. A group of ghost spirit sect cultivators in black clothes and robes. Braving the swirling snow, they wielded various magical treasures and artifacts. The combatants fought a giant, gecko-like bone beast. In midair, not far from the gecko beast, that pale-faced, androgynous elder was floating in midair, coldly watching the scene before him. A group of core formation stage cultivators were engaged in a heated battle with the ancient beast. After a short while, seeing that the 6 or 7 disciples still couldn't take down the bone beast, he frowned, and finally decided to intervene personally. He was seen forming a hand seal. Countless streams of ink-black demonic energy erupted from his body. This yin energy then instantly took shape and condensed, forming to pitch-black torrents. They rushed menacingly towards the gecko-like bone beast. Following closely behind was a giant, shining emerald-green net that descended from above. Mixed within the giant net were countless fist-sized green fireballs that shot densely towards the bone beast. After a series of deafening rumbles, the black light and green flames intertwined. A moment later, the light subsided, revealing on the spot the giant, charred body of the bone beast. The old man waved his large sleeve. A fierce gust of wind blew past. It sent the skeletal corpse flying dozens of yards away. This revealed a wide ice crevice in its place. This ice crevice led straight down, faintly emitting a white light. It was unknown where it led. The old man spoke in a low voice. Then, with a move of his body, he immediately transformed into a streak of black light and flew into it. The other disciples of the ghost spirit sect also rushed in without any hesitation. Among this group of disciples, Wang Chan and Yan Ryan were also present, but the master of the ghost spirit sect and Wang Tiangu were still nowhere to be seen. Not long after the group of ghost spirit sect cultivators entered the ice crevice, the place returned to tranquility. Only snowflakes drifted down silently. As for that skeletal corpse, it was soon covered in a layer of frost and buried beneath the pure white snow. It turned into an inconspicuous snow mound. In the dense forest, where the ghost spirit sect cultivators had previously stayed, Zilin was standing in a certain spot, looking at a seemingly ordinary small mound of earth before him. He was somewhat in a daze. After about the time it takes to drink a cup of tea, he looked up at the giant trees around him, then lowered his head to look at the mound of earth before him. Suddenly, an elegant finger flicked lightly. A brilliant white ball of light shot out. With a bang, after a deep rumble, a rather large crater appeared before him. The crater was filled with a lot of grayish-black flying ash. It danced and filled the sky, and in the large crater, a small half-section appeared. A tree root, burned to a charred black. This should be the place. The ghost spirit sect has many members and great power. It's much easier for them to search than it is for me. But it seems they didn't expect that someone else was also looking for the markers. They were in such a hurry that they left so many traces behind. The disciple's face showed a look of joy as he muttered. Afterward, with a wave of his sleeve, he filled the crater back in. Then he took out a cyan-colored talisman from his hand. After circling a few large trees nearby, he suddenly placed the talisman onto one of the giant trees. As he pressed it on, a clear light flashed instantly. The talisman sank into the surface of the giant tree and vanished without a trace. Then, after carefully identifying his bearings, he turned into a streak of red light and flew into the sky. At a huge canyon, an old Taoist priest gazed at the various restrictive spales at the mouth of the valley, a contemplative look on his face, and behind him were 2 evil ghost-like puppets, standing there motionlessly, looking far towards the other end of the canyon. A vast expanse of blood-red light could be seen faintly flashing. This was one of the passages leading to the inner valley. However, this long stretch of canyon was filled with several types of extremely powerful ancient seals. Although the old Taoist was an expert in the art of formations, whether he could break these seals in a short time was only a 50-50 chance. He didn't know whether he should spend some time searching to see if there was an easier entrance, or waste no time and start right now to try and break the seals. Thus, he hesitated for a moment. Right there, how about we join forces this one time? A cold voice suddenly came from behind the old Taoist. He was none other than the one who had made the soul stone trade with Han Li that day. Perfected Tianjin. The evil ghost puppets behind him were also ones he had re-refined using soul stones. To ancient puppets, each of them possessed the power of an early, nascent soul stage cultivator. Even Perfected Tianjin himself would find it very difficult to deal with either one of them. With such a trump card in his hand, he finally had the courage to come treasure hunting in the Demonfall Valley. At this moment, he heard someone speaking behind him. Startled, he spun around abruptly and looked with a sharp, focused gaze. He saw that 50 to 60 yards away behind him, several cultivators in green robes were silently hovering in midair. They were looking in this direction. The one who spoke was the leader, an elderly man in a green robe. His expression was grim, and he had a long beard. When Taoist Master Tianjin assessed the cultivation levels of these people, his heart skipped a beat. His heart sank completely. These people were all actually Nascent Soul stage cultivators. So, it is fellow Taoist Dongmen of the Yulin sect. These other fellow Taoists look rather unfamiliar. Could they also be elders of your esteemed sect? Taoist Master Tianjin suppressed the shock in his heart, and said with a forced smile, let's just say they are for now. The two puppets behind you, fellow Taoist, do not seem to be ordinary things. It seems they cannot be underestimated. Dongmen of the Yulin sect, after his gaze swept over the two evil ghost puppets, said with a glint in his eyes, you jest, fellow Taoist. They are just two insignificant puppets. How could they possibly be worthy of fellow Taoist Dongmen's attention? However, why would you, fellow Taoist, think of joining forces with this humble one? Taoist Master Tianjin said cautiously, although I have resided in the Jade Forest sect for a long time, and don't interact much with people, I have nonetheless heard of fellow Taoist Tianjin's reputation as a great master of formations, and as for myself, though I am not particularly talented, I also have some knowledge in the art of formations. If either of us were to try and break the formation alone, I'm afraid neither would be very confident of success. However, if we were to join forces, we could surely be twice as effective. Our chances of success would be much greater. The old Taoist said slowly. Upon hearing this, the man named Tianjin furrowed his brow slightly, falling silent in contemplation. He seemed somewhat troubled. What is it? Is fellow Taoist Tianjin afraid I might act against you? How about this? Our cooperation will be limited only to breaking the seal. We will enter Ligu together. As long as there is no major conflict of interest during that time, I would never, for no reason at all, make things difficult for you. Besides, fellow Taoist, do not forget, even if you could break the seal by yourself, if you take too long to do so, the most easily obtainable treasures inside will likely be taken by others, and from what I know, the fellow cultivators who joined this time, many of them are quite knowledgeable in the art of formations. Dong Mantu's expression darkened slightly, but he still patiently persuaded him. Adept Tianjin's heart stirred upon hearing this. He then glanced at the 5 green-robed cultivators behind him. After some consideration, he finally nodded. Since fellow Taoist Dongmen has said so, this humble Taoist will respectfully comply. Let's join forces, fellow Taoist, to break the restriction here. But once we enter the inner valley, the two of us shall go our separate ways. No need to stick together. Ha, that's more like it. Fellow Taoist Tianjin, rest assured, your two puppets are also quite extraordinary. How could I possibly force a fellow Taoist to do something against their will? After entering the valley, we shall each rely on our own luck to find treasures. Upon hearing this, the green-robed old man's face immediately broke into a smile. He hurriedly spoke to reassure him that this was the inner valley. Gazing at everything before him, Han Li couldn't help but mutter to himself. His face was filled with a strange expression.